Hey y'all, I'm James Wright. Welcome to my shop, and today we are restoring two very large frame saws. Every now and then you're at an auction and you see something and think, I want that. But unrealize that a 5-foot long saw doesn't fit in your carry-on and you have to fly back home. Well, I still got it back home. So we're going to be restoring this thing. It really doesn't need that much. It just had been in a rusty barn for years. And so we're going to do some soaking and getting some of the rust off of this. I've been using this metal rescue. It's very similar to Evaporust, and I like it a lot. Though it's getting close to the end of its life, you can only use it for so long. And after pulling it out of that, we ended up taking it back to the wire wheel, and I needed a little bit more out of it. When it's brand new, it comes out looking really nice, but now I think I need to get some new stuff. Maybe I'll switch over to Evaporust now that I can actually get it locally. For the plates, I usually prefer to just scrape them off. Using some soap and cleaner and then scrape them down, or a little bit of WD-40 and scrape them, and that usually works very, very well. However, on these, they were very pitted, and these are both blacksmith made tools, and the thickness on these saw plates was actually kind of wild. It got thicker and thinner and thicker and thinner, and I wasn't able to get off as much as I wanted to while scraping. So I decided to actually do the pre-sharpening on this and getting the teeth close to the finished dimension. They needed a good bit of work, and so I'm actually just shaping the teeth down right now, and then I'm going to soak it and let it work all the way through, and then I can come back and actually sharpen them and get them a little cleaner. So for the crosscut, they're nice big crosscut teeth, and I had to find the largest triangular file I had. But for the rip cut, these are actually relatively small. They're about 4 point per inch, which is actually kind of small for that big of a saw. But we'll go with what we've got and see how it goes. Unfortunately, one tooth broke. One tooth, which is actually pretty good for that. To soak them, I often get some aluminum foil, and you can put it in between a couple boards, and it doesn't need to be that deep. I just need enough for it to go all the way in. And the metal rescue worked relatively well on this, and they came out looking pretty nice. I was kind of happy with that. So once these are all done, then we can go back to the wood. Now, for the wood, we're going to scrape off most of the old gunk that's on them. A lot of times I'll just go back and oil it, but in this case, there was especially on this buck saw, there was a lot of extra junk on there. So we're going to scrape off the majority of it and then come into the fairly fine sandpaper and just kind of smooth off any of the marks from the scraping. A lot of the beams were relatively easy because they were smooth and straight, but this wood was very, very dry, and I knew that it was going to take a lot of oil. You can just see the dust pouring off of these. I put boiled linseed oil, let it soak, put more on, let it soak, put more on, let it soak, and it just kept soaking up more. And by the time I got around the board, I would go back to the first side again, and I just let these take up as much oil as they wanted. And I loved the color and tone that came out of them. They just exploded with all this history and beauty in them. Yeah, this was one of those moments where I was so happy I purchased these because they just look amazing. And I love seeing how everything comes to life when you put the oil in it. A lot of old tools they look amazing once you just put a little more oil back into them. We're going to go back and do the reinstallation on this, and all of these were handmade. Each of the mortise and tenons were ever so slightly different in size. All of the pins that are holding on are these blacksmith cut pins that are actually shaped by the blacksmith, and they're each slightly different sizes because they were cut and shaped ever so slightly on the saw. Even this nut on the end here, this is a blacksmith made nut. I love this. The history in this saw is just amazing and absolutely beautiful. And especially when it comes to the large Roubeau style frame saw, the brackets on this end are all blacksmith made. And these little pins, those are all individually blacksmith made. The screws are cut and shaped by a blacksmith. And just seeing the love and history that went into this saw well over 100 years ago, is absolutely phenomenal. I had a lot of fun with these tenons because trying to match them back up to exactly where they were. You can see the holes in the end were drilled through after everything was in, and then there was a wooden pin that went back in. I haven't made new wooden pins because I had to break those in order to get them to come apart. But I'll get that here soon. They're actually not really necessary unless you loosen it up too much. So I won't do that, or at least I'll try not to. we'll see what the future holds. Then we can pound this back together and put the blade back in, and then we can take these for a test drive and just see, do they actually cut? Because I don't know. But one of the big things you need to know with all these frame saws is you have to tighten these things down. You have to really, really crank them down. I see a lot of people who have problems with them wandering. Most of the time, it's just due to the blade not being tight enough. And that's one of the reasons why these beams are so big. They are under an immense amount of pressure as this pulls everything together. So let's tighten this up, and for the first one we're going to use this buck saw, which is massive and huge, but the teeth on it are surprisingly small. Usually on a buck saw this size, they start going to a tooth and raker, and for a cut like this, there's no reason for me to use a buck saw this size. I should be using a large crosscut saw or a two-man saw, but you can see eventually it cuts through. It wasn't great, and I need to go back and sharpen the teeth a little bit more. But it's one of those things where it's a little kind of odd. If I'm going to cut something like that, I'm going to use the big crosscut saw I have. So here's my large frame saw that I made in the past. And everyone says, well, that's a huge saw, but now in comparison, it's not. This thing is so large, I can't get a full stroke on it. Now, normally I would lean the board away from me, but in this case, I was just in a quick hurry, so I put it in the vise because I needed to get the video out. So it's vertical, and so it's going to be bouncing a lot more. Also, the teeth need a little bit more work. I didn't do the final detail on this one, and I think I need to add a little bit more set into it. So this is the first little test, but I was actually really happy it started marching through this. This is a large block of white oak, and I'm going to be using this future. Once I do a little bit more cleanup on those, we'll have some fun.
So there you have it. Yes, these two are massive. So the story goes, I was at an auction and I saw these two on the table and thought, wow, those are really cool. I'm not going to have the money for them, nor do I really want them because I was out on the East Coast and I had to fly back, and these don't exactly fit in a carry-on. So I'm not going to get them. But then the auction came up and no one bid and no one bid, and I got them each for $5. And then I had to think, how am I going to get these home? So I went to the local Staples and I bought a bunch of boxes and taped them up and made a box and shipped them back to myself. And now we have two more frame saws. Do I need these? No, but they are a lot of fun. I mean, this buck saw, I've never actually played with a buck saw this big, and there isn't much use for this. This one I probably will never actually use, but couldn't say no to it. This frame saw, Roubeau style, is just massive. It's 4.5 feet long and huge. I mean, it's so long that I can't get a full stroke with my own body. I actually would need to have someone else on the other end pulling it back and forth, which I may very well do. So stay tuned for that video because I do need to resaw this log all the way down. But after all that, I now look at my frame saw and I think, that thing's just a little thing, isn't that cute? Yeah, that's the frame saw. We're gonna have some fun with this in the future. So the lesson of the story is don't go to auctions because you never know what you're gonna bring. So I hope you like this, but if you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, things that I could have done differently, let me know those down in the comments down below. I do love reading through those and they help out the channel. Anytime you like, comment, share, subscribe, you are helping us out. Even if it's a snide comment, thank you. I do love those because people think they're hurting me, but they're really not because it helps the channel out. So thank you. But if you have any questions, throw those down there and I'll answer them. But on top of that, if you really want to help us out, think about joining these people over here. Those are some of the patrons on Patreon. And between patrons and members, you guys support this channel. You allow me to ship things like this back home so we can have a little bit of fun. And who knows, if you have some idea of what you'd like me to actually do with these, let me know. I think I'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. Oh look, there's initials carved into it. P. Bunyan.